Welcome to another episode of the CaliCast. I'm your host, Gron. I'm joined by my co-host, Sheikh Tarek. We'll jump right into it.
Do it.
I've been thinking, recently, more so like this past year or so, but specifically past few months. As I get older, I don't know if it's like just growing up, or maybe somebody in the audience could relate, but when I was younger, I always thought of myself like, I'm a good Muslim. I'm not murdering anybody, I'm praying, I'm fasting Ramadan. I'm not saving the world, but I'm not doing anything bad. But as I get older, you start to see like, well, why am I worshiping? Is it because because I realized every time I've worshipped harder, it was always because I heard a sheikh say, oh, if you do this, Allah will give you more. Allah will give you in this dunya. Or stuff like that. If you chase after life, Allah will grant you this life. And then I realized once I hear that, I start chasing, or I start worshiping better. And on top of that, as you get older, or at least, and you just see like all these diseases of the heart that you always hear like talks about, be like, damn, that sucks, Thank God that's not me. But then you get older and you're like, oh, I have a phone addiction. You just oh, I have too much pride in me. I have too much, maybe even entitlement or so on and so forth. So it goes back to my thing of just sincerity. So it's like, how good of a Muslim am I really? Because I have friends, that don't do they might not pray all 5 prayers. They might not do, what we think normally of what a good Muslim is. But I have a lot of respect for them because specifically one, when we were younger, I've known him I did know him for a long time. When he was 16, he was really good at making money a certain way. That way it's haram, not like, oh, he was selling drugs or something, extreme, but it was just more like, oh, technically that's haram, so we're not supposed to do it. And I mean, at 16, right, he had like over $100,000 in his bank account. I saw with my own eyes, proof. And I'm there like, wow, he's really good at this. But, because I was close to him, I said, technically it's not haram. He goes, what? Why? And then, I explained it to him. Usually when like people do something, you say it's haram, but it takes a few days to accept it.
Right.
He accepted it in like 10 minutes. Because there's always, trying to justify until you accept it. And then there's okay, you accepted it, but you're just kind of arguing for the argument's sake. So I could tell like within 10 minutes he accepted it, even though, he probably wasn't praying, he probably wasn't doing all that. And everything else in his life, everything, pushed him, like from what I've seen, pushed him the other way, pushed him to do it. His life's easier, his family's happy, he's taking care of things, everything's good. Like the next day he stopped. His life has become much, much more difficult financial-wise ever since, and maybe in other ways too. Every now and then we might joke about, oh, like, time to do that again, but like as a joke, but in reality, you could tell it never crossed his mind. He will never go back to it just because I said, oh, it's haram. He had everything in his life said, this will grant you what you want in life. This will give you money. You have all these 16-year-olds in high school. You got nothing to do. Not that it's bad, to have money when you're 16, you're a child. But in our culture we have, he was doing it. He could do stuff, and he was thinking future, like, oh, if I do this, I could save up. Buy this by the time I'm 20. Get good. And he stopped, and he never went back to it. And I'm like, that's real sincerity. He doesn't complain about it. He just does it. And then there's me. Okay, I might pray. But why am I praying? I don't pray for the love of Allah. I pray because if I don't pray, I feel bad. I do for myself. If I don't follow Islam, then I feel bad. Then I feel like my life is trash.
Mm-hmm.
So I do it because
you feel like there's some sort of benefit coming to you.
Yeah.
Right. Look, sincerity is a very, very complex topic. Not because the idea of sincerity is complex. It's pretty simple, right? Sincerity is doing something to please Allah or for the purpose of reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Whether that reward is something you want in this life or the afterlife, or just love of Allah or feeling that tranquility, right? So long as it goes back to Allah and you want it from Allah, then generally speaking, that's sincerity, okay? However, where the concept of sincerity is very complex or becomes very complex is when you look at the human's heart from the spiritual lens. And just to kind of give you a type of analogy, how complex is the brain? How complex is our brain?
Incredibly.
Incredibly complex. right? Incredibly complex. How many thousands upon thousands of scholars are there about the human brain? And how many hundreds, if not thousands, of course, thousands of volumes of books have been written just on the brain? Yet, despite all of that, we are still discovering more, and there's more to explore. Right. And so, if that's the complexity of one part of the human, then the complexity of the spiritual side of the heart is of the same thing. Why? Because there's a lot of factors going on. There's a lot going on, and what causes it? So you bring an example of this individual, your friend, right? And his quick response, his quick positive response to your advice. How do we interpret that, right? So you have someone who, from one side, their iman is weak. The person's inability to sustain their 5 daily prayers. That is a sign of weak iman. And to be quite blunt, and I don't say this in order to put judgment on people, to be very careful here, but rather I say this as a type of personal, to use as personal assessment, personal analysis. Okay, if someone has difficulty establishing their prayers, whether that is they kind of sometimes pray, sometimes don't, or they don't pray all 5 daily prayers, although they might be praying some of them, or they pray their 5 daily prayers, but they often, pray the prayers outside of their times, right? That is a sign of a serious spiritual problem. Yet, you might find that same person has another side of their iman that is actually quite healthy, quite alive, like their ability to let go of the haram very quickly. Right? And how do we explain both? And the fact that both are in one heart. And there's a lot that can be said there. But as kind of a preliminary idea, it's that we should view spirituality as being like the human body, in a sense that the human body is comprised of many things. You have many organs, you have many body parts, and a person can be very healthy in some of their body, but very unhealthy in another part of their body. Does that make sense? So someone can have a very healthy heart, but their brain isn't healthy. They can have a very healthy brain, but their lungs aren't healthy. So something similar in spirituality. Spirituality has different parts. You have the love of Allah. You have the fear of Allah, hope in Allah, gratitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, spiritual consciousness, the love of the afterlife. And for a person, they're not all on an equal playing field. They're not all equally strong or equally weak. Well, some might have an extreme amount of love for Allah, but they're weak when it comes to hope in Allah or fear in Allah. Okay, someone might have a lot of they're spiritually conscious, but they're not very grateful. This can happen, right? And normally this happens in people who don't spend much time or any time at all developing their spirituality, but rather their spirituality is developed through nurture. What they go through in life, what they learn from their parents. So this individual, perhaps, their parents were very, very keen on making sure their child stays away from haram wealth.
To be fair, his whole family is like really anti-religion. His parents aren't that bad, but...
So I'm not trying to judge this person. I'm just giving you scenarios here, right? So you can find a person who, their parents are very loose in religion, right? But they're very keen, the father is very keen on making sure his wealth, his income is halal. Because he learned that from his father. Mm-hmm. And he saw the good that comes out of that. So he always mentions it to his children that, I will never take haram money. This haram money, no, I'm giving it away. So it resonates with the child. So the parent developed that part of their spirituality, but not other parts. So you have this complexity here. And it's very, very important to understand this, because the question of how can someone be very religiously engaged yet be caught doing very unethical things? It's actually a pretty simple answer, because one part of their iman is very developed and another part isn't. Okay? And to give a clear example, knowledge versus spirituality, Islamic knowledge versus spirituality. You know, the Quran says that there are scholars of religion who are quite evil. واتلو عليهم نبأ الذي آتيناه آياتنا فانسلخ منها فأتبعه الشيطان فكان من الغاوين. Recite the example of the one who we gave knowledge of the book, and then they kind of فانسلخ منها, meaning that knowledge was nothing more than information in their brain. It did not have any effect on their behavior. And why did they fall into this? Why did they become like this? وَلَكِنَّهُ أَخْلَدَ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ. This person desired the world and worldly gain, and so began using the religion for worldly gain. Right? Now, this is a clear example to break the assumption that if someone is religiously active or knowledgeable in Islam, that somehow automatically entails strong spirituality or very Islamic behavior. That's not the case. Right? Yes, Islamic knowledge is the most effective way and the quickest way of attaining both spirituality and Islamic ethics and behavior, but not necessarily. Okay, so it's important to understand that. Now, the problem will always go back to an amount of sincerity. All I'm trying to say in what I've said is that a person can be very sincere in one part of their iman, but not sincere in another part of their iman. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's how it should be viewed. And so this person might have a very one part of their iman is very alive, very strong for whatever reason. You know, it could be something in nature, or because Allah guided them. Of course, tawfiq is always from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but maybe your reminding of them, your reminder to them, sparked some spirituality in them. So there's a lot of reasons that could have happened, and it's not bizarre. It's not bizarre.
Mm-hmm. Then, when he said, like, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he said that there's some people that are knowledgeable, but they use it to gain worldly gain.
Mm-hmm.
Can you break that down? Because I feel like I'm not a scholar. I'm not like so knowledgeable, but everything I learned about in religion, how I could gain something out of life, I'm more likely to do that than just something else.
What do you mean by that?
Like tahajjud. You get anything you want tahajjud. I would love to say I wake up for tahajjud to praise Allah. You know, I love Him so much, but if I wake up for tahajjud at 3 a.m. middle of the night, it's because I want something.
That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what these people of knowledge are doing. Right? What they're doing is they're utilizing their religion for monetary gain, materialistic gain.
Okay.
Not for asking Allah for worldly gain.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. Right? There's nothing unethical, there's nothing un-Islamic about that. That's actually a part of ibadah. Allah is Ar-Razaq, the one who provides, right? So we ask Him for that. What I mean, what the verse is referring to, what many other ahadith refer to, are those who now exploit the religion for personal gain.
Okay. Like taking charity money.
Taking charity money, getting favors from people, expecting people to put them on a pedestal, the praise of people, making money. Right? You have that, or maybe sometimes political power. So you have people like that.
Mm.
They're there. They've always been there. They will always be there. Right? I just want the common Muslim or the average Muslim to realize that there's nothing bizarre about that. Right? It's unfortunate, but there's nothing bizarre about that and why that comes about. Right? Just because someone is religiously active does in no way mean they have a lot or strong spirituality. And it is very possible that an average Muslim, I say average in their spirituality, mm-hmm. An average Muslim has stronger spirituality than a established scholar. It's possible. It's not common, but nonetheless, it is possible. It is possible that a scholar is teaching a student, and the student has more taqwa of Allah than the scholar. This happens, okay? So it's important for us to know, because every now and then you hear about the qari or the sheikh or whoever it was who is doing some shady thing, so some shady things, right? Don't let that impact you. It's normal. It happens, right? There are people with beards this long, right, who always talk about Allah, and they do the lewdest of things. There are people who wear the amama, the big turban on their head. They're like this, and the sheikh and Allah is behind, the flag of Allah is behind them. But if they had the opportunity, they would burn the world. just religion has become the means for them to enacting and expressing their rage. There are people like that, man. It's very unfortunate. And sometimes, for me, I kept hearing my teacher in Jordan say this. There are people who use their religion for personal gain. There are shuyukh out there, I say in terms of just the way they look, who are in their positions and could care less about their religion. They start their organizations, their movements and whatnot. Sheikh, so and so, we are the Ansar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are these people and the ones who are going to give the victory to the ummah. And all of it is just nothing more than an attempt to seize power. And if they had the ability, they would, privately, they're smoking weed and drinking alcohol and fornicating and whatnot. There are people like that. And I remember my teacher kept saying it and saying this. He says this publicly, right, in front of the masjid he was the imam of. And I remember, yeah, that makes sense. But it took about 4 years before it clicked in my mind and I said, oh my God, there are people like this out there. So yeah, it makes sense that there's some people who do that. Yeah, I could see that, but
bad and everything.
But for it to actually hit your heart and say, oh my God, there are people like that, right? That's a different story. It took me 4 years to kind of realize the seriousness of this.
That I get that a lot of from, like the red pill Muslim community. You know what red pilling is, right? For those who don't know, red pill is like, if you know what a simp is, red pill is like the opposite. Simps, like, they'll give like Twitch streamers, like girls, money, and like if somebody like comments something like, oh, you're ugly, they'll like white knight defend her. Like, they're really like, quote unquote, I hate using the word, like beta male type, like really under the boot of the woman. Well, the red pill is like the complete other extreme. It's like women, they're only good for recreation and cooking and they're dishwasher. That's it. Like, this is their mentality. Women only want guys with money. Like, so really extreme. So all that on top of that, like there's a little part of YouTube where it's like just really extreme, like red pill Muslim guys, and I'm so, at least for me, it's more comedic because I see like a little bit of what you said in them, because like, oh, this is, like they'll call out like really like established sheikhs. Wouldn't even call that Mufti Menk out of all people, because he was knitting and teaching his children how to knit. It's like, we're teaching our ummah today. You're teaching them to be weak. You're teaching. I was like, bruh.
Yeah, I remember that. I don't really care too much about the haters will hate. There are some people who are just they're fitna mongers, right? Their only way to be heard is to create problems. There are people like that, and this is a disease of the heart. Let's be very frank. Again, I say this not to take this and then start applying and pasting on people. I say it for personal and self-evaluation, right? There are people who have a disease in their heart. And that disease is what's called ghurur and ujub, this self-satisfaction. They're a snub. I mean, they see themselves as a lot grander than they actually are, and this can reach such a level where they see themselves as the most guided person in the ummah. Right, the most guided person in the ummah. I mean, like today. And that they're the only ones who are on guidance, and everyone else is misguided. And now they have the noble endeavor of bringing people back to guidance, right? And this is such a major spiritual disease. Why? Because, well, first and foremost, Allah says, وَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not do self-purification of the self, meaning do not see yourself as pure. That's a major sin, right? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions. And that alone is enough of a disease of the heart. And as you were mentioning, when I was younger, you see this, and as you get older, you start noticing these things more. That's normal human development. Why? Because, well, look at a child. When you take a stuffed doll away from a child, how do they react?
Cry.
What does that mean? I mean, it's like the end of the world to them. Why? Because their world is so small. And so this stuffed animal, this teddy bear, has such a major place in their world. Why? Because of how small the world is. There's only just my mom, my dad, right? And my toys. That's it. And so if they're missing one of those, a huge part of my world is gone. Mm-hmm. But as you grow, when you integrate into the world, you see more, you see how massive it is, how major it is. Right? Same thing in spirituality. When you look at who's out there and you sit with the major scholars of the time, and you read the works of the major scholars in history, you cannot but feel inferior. Look at how much they know, in comparison to how much I know. So it's a very normal part of development that comes about through experience in life. And so when someone sees themselves as grand, it's because of how inexperienced they are, how little they know. And so it is a common part of intellectual development and spiritual growth that you begin feeling so grand, but as you actually grow in spirituality, you feel smaller, 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 smaller. It's not that your spirituality is actually weakening, but you're comparing yourself to what's out there. And you see how small you are, how little you've actually done, how insignificant your knowledge is. So when someone comes with this mentality where I know it all, that is evidence enough that they don't know anything. They don't know anything, right? Also, another reason why it's a major spiritual disease is the following. Right? This claim that I'm the most guided person. Of course, they're never going to say that. But, I can guarantee you their heart is thinking it. They just won't admit it. This mentality really is a claim, an indirect claim that I'm the only one God guided. As though Allah's the Lord of me and that's it. Allah the Lord is only caring about me. And there's no one else in this universe who Allah is caring about. Right? That claim is extremely, extremely bad. Just that thought. Why? Because Allah is the Lord of all. Do you think Allah only cares about you? And so He only guided you? And all these people who go to Umrah, and all these people who are in the masajid, and all these students and shuyukh who are in these schools of Islamic schools and the madaris and whatnot, and all those who are making dua to Allah, Allah doesn't care about them? He didn't give any of them guidance? Right? So this is extremely, extremely unfortunate. Those who behave this way, this cancel culture, that's not the right word, but this mentality of I'm the knight, I'm the savior of Islam. Mm-hmm. This behavior where I'm coming to restore the truth and whatnot. That's just pure self. What's the word I used?
Righteousness.
Self-righteousness. That's very dangerous, very, very dangerous. And so what you find is that the more a person learns, the less harsh they become in their critique and criticism. Why? Because, the more they learn, the more they see their mistakes, and the more mistakes they see in themselves, the more they excuse other people's mistakes. Excuse in a sense that, that's wrong, that's right, but you're not doing it in a way where it's like personal. Mm-hmm. How dare you, and who do you think you are, and you're such a misguided person and whatnot.
That makes a lot of sense because I've seen that in myself as I grew up. I realized that, how when you first really find Islam for yourself, you kind of almost go extreme, but you have no knowledge. Mm-hmm. But you have really good I want to please Allah, so the little that you know, you'll take
fire
forever.
Of the youth. Yeah.
I remember watching a podcast. A convert, now he's a sheikh, does really good work, established online, people like him. But says when he first converted, he was all about the deen. He would show up to his friend's house, right? A day after he converted, knocking on their door for him. Time for Fajr, let's go, bro, we gotta wake up. Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes it's refreshing to see, but I get what you mean. It's as you get older, it's no longer critiquing people, it's just more you're right, it's more this is better. Or even when you get older, that thing of there's only one right way, you see that? Not really.
Well, sometimes there is only one right way. Well, we got to be careful here, mm-hmm. right? Sometimes the sin is clear, mm-hmm. and you have a role to play when it comes to addressing that sin. But there's a difference between I'm going to address it that, oh, you evil person, how dare you, fear Allah, versus, I'm going to help this person do the right thing and stay away from paradise. These are two very different mentalities, right? And just to show you how different mentality it is, it's the shaitan who goes and tries to bash the believer, humiliate them, demoralize them. But it's the angels who are trying to encourage, right? Who are calling to Allah, hey, you don't want to do this compassionately. Mm-hmm. So, this is, what was I saying? These are two very different ways of approaching it.
You're right. I guess I should word it better. You're right about that. Sin is always sin. I guess in more of how do I put this?
I understand what you're saying, right? That there are many issues in Islam where there's
you don't have to take one opinion,
right?
Or you don't have to take one rap.
And I have no right to criticize another person for practicing Islam in a way that is valid, mm-hmm. especially because it goes back to the leaders of faith, mm-hmm. like the four madahib or the companions and whatnot.
Exactly. But yeah. On a different note, my friends been telling me, oh, bro, the Euphrates like 90% dried up, 80% dried up. Do you know about the Euphrates, and the story of this mountain of gold, 99 out of 100 people would die?
Right. Yeah. So it's in a hadith that one of the signs of the Day of Judgment, a minor sign of the Day of Judgment, that is that a mountain of gold will appear in the Euphrates, and that many people.
Was it Euphrates specifically?
I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
One of the two rivers in Iraq, Euphrates or the Tigris. I'm pretty sure it was Euphrates. But correct me if I'm wrong. And then people would go to fight for it, and then of every 1,000 people who would go there, 999 would be killed, right, in the fighting and whatnot. And each person would go thinking that I'm the one who's going to survive. So the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us that if this moment happens in your life, stay away. Right? Stay away from it. So is this the time? Allahu Alam. I mean, that would be pretty intense. But if it is the time, stay away from it. Don't book your flight to Iraq and say that it's going to be me. I'm the one person who's going to get all this mountain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides. You don't need to go and kill yourself or kill other people, get yourself killed to get some money. In the end, how much gold are you going to hold in your pockets? But it's most likely that when this happens, it's armies of various countries are going to go in battle for it, right? That's why the mass casualties and whatnot.
Okay.
Allahu Alam, I mean.
Because I was thinking, it makes sense, because if it's a Muslim country, most of them are not going to go around, and the government will be like, okay, just in case, we won't touch it. So I was thinking, foreigners might be like, oh, look at these stupid Arabs thinking their God said don't go. It's just gold in the water, bro. Just grab it. I'm going to fly there, grab some gold, come back. So I was thinking, it might be just a bunch of maybe not Muslims, or Muslims that are in foreign countries that don't have much knowledge, that think, oh, nobody's going to stop me. They don't want to go near that.
So I'm guessing it's countries will gather around it. And if an army of a country goes, and they're not going to let civilians go in, right?
Yeah.
But you can see how much blood would be spilled if China and America and Russia all.
That must be some type of gold. That must be.
Yeah, it seems like it's a huge amount of gold, worth trillions, or hundreds of billions if they're going to go after it to that extent. So Allah Ta'ala alam.
So that'll be an interesting thing. Because it's not like they went to Iraq for some oil. It's not like they went to Afghanistan for some,
Right.
Because that's never
right? Not at all.
War for money and power has never happened before.
Never.
And even when I think about it, because China is relatively close to Iraq, and you think about the East Turkmenistan and all those people that are in those concentration camps. And then it reminds you of I remember I was in history class, and our teacher was saying we went to war not because we were good people in World War I, World War II. The people in World War II, yeah, they went to war to free the Jews. The government, they went because they gave more money, because the U.S. government, they gave money to Germany and the Axis and the Allies, both wars, both sides. But in World War II, in World War I, they just gave a lot more money to the Allies. So they were like, oh my God, the Allies are gonna lose. We gotta go in to get our money back. We gave them so much money and this and that. They're not gonna be able to pay. I think it was only 20. It was in the 2010s, right before 2020, that Germany finally paid off its war reparations for World War II.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's not shocking.
Yeah.
We're not holding our breaths waiting for these governments to do something selfless or something for the enrichment of humanity. Right? I mean, if there's a administration or a president or a king who works towards the enrichment of his or her society, that would be, we would see that person as such a great individual. Why? Because it's so rare.
And they'll face a lot of opposition from the other end. Or even from the same end, because there's corruption.
Maybe.
Because, it's illegal to give a politician money in America to vote and act a certain way.
Is it?
It's lobbying.
Lobbying is illegal?
Legal.
Is legal, right, yeah.
Yeah.
America's all about lobbying.
It's all about those companies. Anywho. So on that note, we'll jump on to the next topic.
What's that?
I'm not sure, but I feel like we just need more time.
Yeah.
I think there's a little too short. Get a 40,
Good one. What's on the news?
What's on the news? Let's see. I don't know. I've been way too busy with school. It's almost as though being in college, you don't really know what's going on in the world. You just kind of know what's going on in your class. I could draw you some really nice organic molecules, but I can't tell you what's going on the other side of the world. But what's interesting is I'm also taking psychology. even though so like my psychology is online, it's a little like iffy. It's like once a week, and the little bit I pay attention, I find it very interesting because immediately I see the effects of psychology like around me. Like I'm sure you said you took psychology a little bit. What I forgot what it was. It was called not discerning. It was when you do something in which you don't see yourself, you make excuses. You're serious because of this cognitive dissonance. And when I learned about that, I was like, wow, everybody does it. Everybody. And I always wonder, instead of being like, damn, I messed up, I should probably be better. Why is it that, you know what? It wasn't my fault. You think like more humans, like, they're educated nowadays. Most men, they get education. You think stuff like cognitive dissidence, we a lot less. But from my life, I see it like everywhere.
I don't think that's anything strange in human behavior. No one likes to feel wrong because it hurts their pride.
But it's the truth.
I understand that, right? But it's nonetheless, it hurts a person's pride. It makes them feel lesser than they want to feel. And we're created in a way where we don't want people to be better than us, and we don't want to feel inferior. And that's why humans feel jealousy, they feel envy, they feel anger towards the accomplishments of other people and whatnot. Now, of course, these characteristics are very, very problematic to our iman and our spirituality, so we have to fight against it. And how do we do that is by understanding that Allah's qada and qadar has power over all things. And so if someone succeeds, it means absolutely nothing in relation to me. Someone's success does in no way hinder my ability to succeed. And if someone acquires $1 billion, then that in no way limits what I can receive, right? But that all goes back to the principle in Iman that Allah had the qada and qadar is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you lose that and you start thinking that one person's success by default limits my ability to succeed or the level of my success, then that's a completely different story. And so you see that this type of mentality most in kind of corporations and in governments, where you cannot share the earth. Because if you share the earth, that means the limited resources are going to be even more limited to you. And that's why empires are always expanding and they're going to different countries, to steal their stuff, to get more wealth for themselves. Also in corporations, I mean, it's either I get the customer or you get the customer, right? It's either they buy a Nike or an Adidas, right? And that's the way they view it. And so it's a competition over limited resources. And of course, there's going to be attacks against each other, the effort to destroy the other company or to buy it out, and all this shady business that goes on. For the believer, if one company succeeds, okay, his resources are unlimited, and if I see my provisions, my income, my profits coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, well, it's coming from an unlimited resource.
So I guess always have faith in Allah.
That's why it's there, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, hey, this is cool, this is what we believe in. It's literally a way of life.
It is
a way of life and a way of perceiving life and reality. It's very healthy. It limits negative emotions. It limits psychological problems. It limits wars. It limits killing. It limits envy, jealousy. All these things that create problems for individuals and humanity.
100%. Me and my sister usually have this conversation like once every month. Like where we should be sleeping, I should be going to like class or something in the morning, or she has like a meeting or research project, whatever. But instead we stay up, talking. And every time it's always the same thing. It's always that how can people live without Islam? Because if we think about it, like now that I know what Islam is, if I try to live without it, I couldn't function. In like a week, I'll be depressed. I couldn't wake up in the morning. I don't want to do anything. It's like you said, it limits a lot of problems in life. And so when we think about it, it's like I feel bad for non-Muslims because they don't know what this is, and they live a life of what I could imagine is hell. Everything you do, you see from a worldly perspective. Every hit you take isn't expiation for my sin, or it'll be better for me, or it'll make me stronger in the future. It's more though, dang, I got hit, I'm not popular, I don't have money. It's such a shallow but also such a depressing way to live.
It is, because we're viewing it from kind of a certain angle, but if you're inside of it, you don't really realize it. Right? You think that that's what it is. It is what it is. But for some people, I mean, as you said, they really can't handle it, and so they choose to take their lives, their life. And you have a lot of psychological problems, among which is the existential vacuum, this feeling of nothingness, because I have no purpose in life. That really nothing means nothing. There's nothing that means anything. Whatever I do, it's really meaningless. And this is extremely difficult on the human being. We cannot accept that there is no meaning to something. And people who, like atheists, who try and who kind of their entire ideologies revolves around that. Well, there really is no meaning behind what goes on. It's just randomness in terms of when it rains. It's just a series of causes and effects that doesn't mean anything beyond that. For the believer, we can scientifically explain the process, right? But we add to that it's not it didn't randomly rain on this part of the earth, but rather Allah is the one who chose that part of the earth to receive that rain. And so it speaks something, it says something. And if there's a drought, it means more than just rain isn't coming. It means that check your iman, check your behaviors. And if flooding occurs, again, check your iman, check your behaviors. So Islam is able to incorporate meaning to everything. Meaning in a sense that there's a reason why these things happen, and there's a way to react to it. So obviously two very, very different paradigms. But when I listen to people, and of course I'm just saying this from my perspective as a Muslim, when I listen to people who say that there's just no meaning in life, right? It's like they have to convince you that there's no meaning to life. Whereas if you tell someone, there is meaning to life, their question isn't, well, prove it to me that there's meaning in life. The question tends to be, well, what is that meaning? Does that make sense? So it's like, I accept there's a meaning, but what is that meaning? Of course, again, the academics and atheists and whatnot, they might ask the question, prove to me that there's meaning. But when you engage normal, like the common person, it's more about, well, what is that meaning? Explain to me, convince me that what Islam is saying is the meaning of life, that's the true meaning. Instead of prove that there's a meaning in the first place.
Before I make my next comment, I saw my friend sent me a little TikTok video about this. The top would say atheist saying that there's no meaning to life, and the guy would say, then kill yourself. Why won't you kill yourself? There's no meaning. Kill yourself. I don't know. I find that pretty.
Well, you gotta be careful with that stuff, man.
I know it's messed up. But I feel like a lot. I guess it might be difficult for those non-Muslims to, when you tell them, the meaning technically is to worship Allah. For them, that originally seems so bleak that it might be like, I don't want to accept that. I don't want to live that life.
Yeah, because for a few reasons. Number one, the word worship is very limited in the Western paradigm. Worship is just do certain rituals. That's it. In Islam, worship is a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a way of life. It's engaging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in literally every single thing we do. So they have that limited understanding or limited definition of what worship is. And another thing is just the way society is structured. The Western world, the era of modernity, structured the world, structured the era around purely worldly satisfaction. That's it. The way the government is structured, the way the economy is structured, the way societies are structured are exclusively around worldly life. That's it. And so when these things became institutionalized through the institution of government or institutions of society, then that's what's taught, right? And people try to say, we're just smarter, more advanced and whatnot. It's not really. It's just we were nurtured this way. And I'll give you an example. How much do you trust science? And not you personally, but let me put it this way. How much does the average American trust science? The average American trusts science wholeheartedly, without a doubt. The Western world trusts science without a doubt. Very much. Forget about the politics for a moment. Forget about the politics. If someone comes and says that I did an experiment, and I did the experiment right, and it was replicated, and it followed the entire scientific process. If it's strong enough, it could become a law, right? And when something is a law, it means it is guaranteed to happen this way, right? We can determine how far away a star is, simply by what? Whatever formula is there to determine the distance in terms of light, how far light travels and whatnot. So we have this trust in science, in the efficacy, in the soundness of science. Where did that come from? Well, we were taught that in school. What we weren't taught is to trust Allah. What we weren't taught is who Allah is. What we weren't taught is the why questions of life. We were taught the how, the science part. We weren't taught the why part. And so if you talk to the average, American, whether Muslim or non, and the question of why is alcohol forbidden comes up, why does Islam prohibit alcohol? Let me just say a Muslim, if I tell the Muslim because Allah said so, and here's the evidences in Quran and Hadith, what's the response most likely going to be?
Okay.
No. The response is, yeah, but why?
Oh, yeah.
Right? But why?
Because Allah said so. Like, what do you mean why?
Because Allah said so, right? Yeah, but why? And I say, okay, all the research science says that alcohol is bad for you.
Oh,
okay, I get it. It makes sense, right?
It's like back in the class,
right?
Yeah.
Why is that? Because in school we're taught to trust science. We're not taught to trust what Allah says in the Quran. And so that's one of the challenges of our time.
It makes a lot of sense.
And so, how do we get on this topic?
Beginning topic?
Why did I start talking about this?
Because science, we went back to. I don't even know. I'm too low on sleep.
So the meaning of whatever, a lot of the way we function is due to nurture, right? We're taught to think this way. We're taught not to think this way. We're taught to include this in our assessment or analysis of whatever we're doing, our choices. We're not taught something else, right? And so for us Muslims, when it comes to whether the Muslim community, or teaching our youth, or teaching our children, or engaging our fellow Muslims, it's not an impossible endeavor to make people more religiously inclined, right? And that's what we need to do. Right? However, we got on this topic, I forgot.
What's it called? I just want to say two things. One, I was gonna say I trust science pretty well. So if my reaction was like, I'm not like an anti-vaxxer, anti-science, I'm vaccinated, I'm good. Another thing I heard, Faraz Zahabi, he's a Muslim, but he's I guess you could say a philosopher, like Islamically. He has a lot of education that, that's his education. He did it like the proper way. He said something interesting. Well, he trains, world-class fighters. So he's on the Joe Rogan podcast, world-class UFC fighters. He's like the best trainer in the world right now. Nobody can train you better. He said something interesting. He said that, and he's a lover of science, He said, people take science as fact, right? But they don't realize the philosophy, or like people believe in science, but they don't believe in or they don't know the philosophy of science. A lot of scientists, they're scientists in that subject, in the molecular biology, organic chemistry, but they don't know the philosophy of science itself. And he was saying that, and his first question was pretty, I guess for me, a little mind-blowing. Is a scientific fact the same as a mathematical fact? I ask you.
I don't know. Tell me.
So a scientific fact is not the same as a mathematical fact. Mathematical fact, nobody can argue. 1 + 1 always equals 2. If I have 3 apples, you eat 1, how many apples do I have left? 2. So mathematical fact is like really high up on the, on the fact list. I'm not using it right, but do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's levels to how much you could trust something. And then he said that science is, he loves science. He's not a doubter of science itself. He's a doubter of the explanation behind it, because science is just, I see an observation. I observed the ball from the sky go to the ground. I observed that. Okay, we all observed that. But why that's happening, that's where science comes in. And humans,
how that's happening, that's where science comes in.
How? Yeah, thank you. How that happens, that's where humans come in. And if you look throughout scientific history, we're always wrong. We're never 100% right. We'll be closer to each step, but we'll never be 100% right. And he used an example of saying, imagine a man came along named Isaac Newton, right? And he said, I see the apple fall, and I think it's because of something called gravity. Because the mass of the Earth is large, it pulls things towards it, and that's why the apple falls towards the center of the Earth. That's why the moon rotates around us and not us around the moon, because we have more atoms, we have a larger mass, we're more dense. That's where that happens. And then I come along and I say, you know what, you're wrong. I think it's because we have invisible gremlins with I'm saying this not because I believe it, but for the sake of the argument, so you could see, compare. I believe that it's gremlins, invisible gremlins with infinitely long lassos, and it pulls the apple down towards itself. Obviously, it's pretty ridiculous, but when you break down the logic behind both, are the same. It's that they're both appealing to magic. Newton's colleagues, other scientific members, not that they weren't haters of science, they were scientists themselves. They said, oh, you're like established people, oh, you're appealing to magic. There's more atoms on the Earth, that's why we have more lasso gremlins, so they could put the moon rotates around us and not us around the moon. Technically both make sense, but which one's right? So what happens is, his peers, they saw that, oh, what he said makes sense. Not only does it confirm everything that has happened, but all this information that we couldn't figure out, it explains that as well. So now we look through the eyes of Newton, right? We put on Newton glasses. So that's how we see the world. Because science is always in two stages. A revolution stage, like Newton, like now we change the glass. Now we see a world like this. And then I forgot the name of the other phase, but just, you learn a little bit. But it's always confirming what you already knew.
I like that.
Yeah, so you look through the eyes of Newton, the world. Okay, now everybody's like, oh, Newton, super smart guy. Then another man comes along and says, nope, he is wrong. And his name is Einstein. He says gravity is not a pulling force, it's a pushing force. And here's the reason is really complicated. I don't remember most of it. And he says gravity is not a pulling force, it's a pushing force. And then science come along, say what you said confirms everything we learned, and all this new information. Oh, actually, I did it wrong. Let's take a step back. But over time, a little bit of we confirmed we're still in Newton glasses, so we took a step back. We confirmed everything and all this new information. As time goes on, we learn a little new things little by little, but there's a little bit of information that we can't explain that we just sweep under the rug, and we keep sweeping and we keep sweeping. At a certain point, it's so huge that somebody's like, no, I see that. There's something wrong. There's something we don't know yet. So Einstein comes along and says, look, it's a pushing force, not a pulling force, and that explains everything we knew before and all this new information that we didn't know what to make sense of. Now we took off those Newton glasses and we put on the brand new XL, space gold Einstein glasses. And so it's not that now we base our, gravity and a lot of our relativity and all that ideas through Einstein. So it's that people take science as something like, yes, it made medicine, it built the world. I'm a STEM major. I love science, so I want to do when I grow up. But they forget that science, I guess he didn't say this, but I would say this, by nature technically isn't always right, because throughout the whole history of humanity, the longer we go, the more we're like, oh, technically we were wrong. It's like this. Same thing with the atom. Bohr came along. Bohr was a model of an atom. It was a perfect circle that went around, and then people came along and said, no, it's not a perfect circle. The orbital of the electron is not a perfect. It's more of an oval. And then at first, people thought it was just a proton and then just electrons. And somebody came along, nope, there's also a neutron. And we're like, the atom is the only smallest thing ever. And now my organic chemistry teacher, I remember last year, I had her for Chem 3. She has a PhD. She's one of she's worked in industry. She does research. She's a very smart woman. Even she says that scientists now, they think they found something smaller than the atom. This whole time we thought the atom was the smallest thing. And we had one slide because we don't have much information on it. And they called them I don't know what they call them.
Gremlins.
Yeah, gremlins. That's the problem. But it's that, yes, science is good, but you cannot hold scientific fact the same as a mathematical fact, which I believe almost everybody, especially in the Western world, does. They try to take science to explain everything, and just because science can't explain it or hasn't proven it yet doesn't mean it's not true, doesn't exist. So their idea of oh, why God, why? It's why? Your science is by nature a little default. We get better and better as time goes on, but you can't apply that it's the ultimate truth, in which they do.
Right.
And he
so
goes
the
on
difference
to
between science versus scientism. We believe in science, but we don't follow scientism that says that science can explain everything, and then science is the ultimate truth.
Yes, that's
that
not
truth comes through science. Right? So we believe in science, we follow it. Of course, the Quran and Muslim
we wouldn't
history
have the camera,
right?
the computer if it wasn't for Muslims.
Exactly. So it's never been a problem in our history, but the scientists of the Muslim world never followed science as though this is the path to truth. Rather, science to them was an endeavor of knowing who Allah is. That's how they understood it, and that's why. So when you look at the manuscripts of the scientists, it always starts with Alhamdulillah, min ajaibillah. Right? Alhamdulillah, and among the astonishing things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is this and that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And even the scientific method that the West, like, they love using, especially like to prove against God. You can't measure something. I know it was Muslim, and I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure this was the name. I'm pretty sure it was Jabir ibn Hayyan that was the first person to ever develop the scientific method. It was definitely a Muslim. I remember that. I remember doing a project on him. But I believe his name was Jabir ibn Hayyan. Unless he's like the medical guy, then I'm wrong. But he was the one that did it. But of course, if you Google him on, and I did all this research, and we did the project for the masjid, and I did all this research, and he was like the father of chemistry. Because of him, we went from alchemy to chemistry. We went from maybe we can make gold to do some experiments. Let's learn how to make different compounds. But if you Google the father of chemistry, some Western guy that like hundreds of years came after him, and he claims all his work. It's like, bro, come on.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the vaccine.
That's part of the colonial mentality of we're the ultimate power, and therefore everything needs to gravitate to us and comes from us.
Even vaccines. Well, all enough on this. I know. If you Google, it'll be some white guy, some white slave in America. In reality, he got where he got the vaccines from. The idea of taking dead or weakened diseases and putting it in yourself so your body can immune. He got the idea from a slave. We learned this, American history class. So just to make sure, I wasn't educated overseas. This is America, born and raised teacher. He loves America. We're all patriots. He said that he got it from a slave. The slave said, "Oh, back home, if a cow was diseased, or whoever was diseased, we take the scab off and then we ground it up, and I don't know if they eat it or inject it, but But if you Google it, obviously it's gonna show a white man, even though." I used to my knowledge, the continent of Africa, or at least certain parts, knew about it way before.
There you go. I don't know about that.
So, I guess that's a good place to end off. Hopefully, we'll learn something today. Thank you, and Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.